So my report was on diversity, and to be perfectly honest, this report threw me off a little bit. It was not about the diversity that I had expected, and that probably has more to do with um, my context per se. I teach in public schools, and everything that deals with diversity. When they say diversity here, they mean various groups that you may be a part of. Um, but the way that Williams actually approached diversity was a little bit different. It was from looking at the standpoint of religious groups. Um, and in his discussion of this, he really points out three major points. The first point that he really speaks of is that religion itself is not the problem. Um, the problem is interpretation, and if you are a part of that group that believes that your religion calls for violence, he William says that you are negating the idea that you are uh, in worship of the transcendent. Um, Violence suggests that some level of religious insecurity also. So as I was saying, Williams actually believed that um, some level of violence would indicate that that religious group uh, had lost its idea that they were not defending the transcendent and that the transcendent can defend themselves. And so there seemed to be some level of issue with understanding that there was an interpretation issue. Um, the divine does not need violence, and violence in any faith is inappropriate. Um, so this violence has led to the use of logic, which was his third point. So the first point would have been um, religion is not the problem; it's actually the solution. The second one is violence within. His second major point is violence within a religion. Um, Actually leads to the understanding that there's a misinterpretation of the sacred scripture because the transcendent does not need any level of uh, um, defense. And then his last one is that the use of violence within religion has led to the idea that logic actually is where secular society should be within their understanding. Well, that those 3 points are the ones that he led with, and each one of those points has its major issues as we talk about looking at how we interpret the diversity of religion as it relates to basically living in harmony. And so let's just take a look at what he said, and I'm going to kind of read from my paper and give you all an understanding of exactly which direction Mr. Williams was going when he gave an understanding of the way that we should look at how how diverse religious groups can work together in order to accomplish what we call social harmony, or he described as social harmony. So, first of all, Mr. Williams believes that the problem major, as far as religion is concerned, as far as interpretation is concerned, the problem is that there is a misinterpretation of what the transcendent wanted those that were followers to do. There's no need for violence because there's no need to protect the transcendent. And because of this violence based on the parameter of, or the idea that religion gave me a certain level of authority to harm someone else, secular society has said that religion should not have any space within the public space to actually have an idea. Um, and so, because there was an elimination of this idea that religion should be within the social space, there came about, especially within Europe, the Enlightenment. During the Enlightenment, everything was based on logic. There was a problem with the logic, though. Logic meant that might made right. So you were either going to agree with what the major group was going to say or had said, or you are going to be relegated to the uh, back seat of any type of argument that was going to be taking place at that time. And so power is used to help or to make people agree on certain values. However, with religious groups, that always cause the problem because there are certain things within religious groups that are non-negotiables. And so what happened was power can't agree on certain values. Religious language itself is a problem as far as the interpretation of religion, which is why you have that level of violence. But because in theology, there is no need to protect the sacred or the transcendent. Mr. Williams says that it was a misinterpretation of the scripture, and that's what led to the violence amongst different religious groups. He also said that there was basically people that believed that their failures reflected negatively upon their core beliefs, and that negative idea about their core beliefs actually caused them to be violent, which is where that argument of there's no necessity for violence to defend the transcendent. In fact, if you look at John 19:36, Jesus says that my kingdom is not of this world. And so power is an appropriate vehicle for faith. So Mr. Williams says that if you are going to use power to inflict your faith, it's really not faith. And if you look in the Bible, the scripture says that people believe things but without a heart change. People will do things but without a heart change. There really is no change. Amongst Christians, remember, we really consider that the heart is where true change takes place. Now, you can be compelled by those that are in power to do certain things, but those that are in power have not necessarily changed the core thoughts of that person, because any issues or any ideas that are disagreed upon by the general population or the presiding force, I guess, at that point, if you don't change the heart, you're not going to change the mindset. And so even though some people may do things because they've been compelled to do things, that does not necessarily does not necessarily mean that they actually believe what they are doing at the time. This led to logical thought, as he said, during the Enlightenment. And what it did was it basically put forth certain logical ideas. But logic itself normally leads to... So some religious beliefs are too important to give up, and these challenge contemporary thought. And so you basically have a disagreement, basically, between religious groups and those that believe those things that are contemporary. This disagreement led to unity being compelled by force, which is always going to undermine moral substance of a social and political life. As I said before, there's going to be a group that, even though they do things because they've been compelled, that does not mean that there's been a heart change or really an identity change as far as the thought process. And so religious plurality serves to foster social unity, which is actually odd. When I read it, it didn't really make, or I didn't really understand the concept. But as I read on, it made a lot of sense. There are certain things that religious groups hold dear, and that they understand that if one group is suppressed by the powers, the powers that be, the next group that may actually be suppressed for their thoughts or their ideas may actually be another one of the religious groups that is also maybe considered to be out of the mainstream amongst the powers that be. This is true because groups can look for their common ownership of certain things. One of the things that has happened in this community is there are multiple groups of religions, Jews, Christians, Hindus, Muslims. They all, we had a water crisis here. During the water crisis, everyone stepped up and made sure that water was available to various families within the community so that they would have something to drink. He points out that there have been some differences, but they will defend one another, especially when they face non-religious authority on things like climate change and bioethics. To be perfectly honest, there is very little logical argument outside of using a religious view that says that a human is anything more than an animal or an organism. But if you are part of a group that believes that you are sacred because of your faith, that would give you some reason to basically have that group, or humans in general, defended and taken care of. By being diverse, it prevents a state of absolutism. Religion helps us to understand that we are shaped by some common type of religious history. So there's an intersection here, and this is something that I really agree with. It kind of folds into a history lesson. The Christian church developed its understanding of the sciences and the math based on Muslims, to be perfectly honest. Jonathan Sachs points out that there is a dignity in difference, and this difference is what makes diversity necessary for us to get along. One of the issues that, well, I guess one of the things that kind of took me off guard by reading Mr. Williams, I had to actually look up his background. Didn't really understand it. But the books that we've read in this class all come from a non-Southern, non-evangelical Christian background, which has caused me, well, not all of them, but it has caused me to have to think outside of the box. I don't necessarily take issue with anything that was said within chapter, I think it's 24. However, there are some things that I think he may have that may be necessary to allude to help us understand why we have some of the issues that we have amongst various religious groups. And so with that said, I'm going to be posting this. The society